20 years of cold showers. The day I finally snapped and gave my husband exactly what he'd been giving me. The morning started like countless others over the past 2 decades. I shuffled into our bathroom, still groggy from sleep, my mind already cycling through the day's responsibilities. The kids needed lunches packed. I had that important presentation at work, and somewhere in between, I needed to squeeze in a grocery run. Just another typical Tuesday in our suburban life. I reached for the shower handle, turned it on, and wham! Ice-cold water blasted me directly in the face and chest. The shock sent me stumbling backward, gasping, my heart racing from the sudden assault of freezing water. Again. For what felt like the thousandth time, my husband Mark had left the shower diverter valve up. 20 years. 20 goddamn years I'd been asking him to push that little metal rod down after his showers. Such a simple request. Such a tiny action that would take literally 1 second of his time. But no, apparently that was too much to ask. I stood there dripping and shivering, staring at that innocent-looking shower head that had once again become my morning nemesis. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage exactly. Rage burns hot and fast. This was something colder, more calculated. This was 20 years of accumulated frustration crystallizing into a single moment of absolute clarity. Mark and I met when we were both 19, young and stupid and convinced that love conquered all. He was charming in that scattered, absent-minded professor way, even though he was studying business. I found his forgetfulness endearing back then. The way he'd lose his keys 3 times a day, forget our dinner reservations, show up an hour late to my parents' house because he'd gotten distracted by a bookstore. It was all part of his quirky charm. He'll grow out of it, I told myself. Once we're married, once we have real responsibilities, he'll step up. 5 years into our marriage, concerned about his chronic disorganization, I gently suggested he get tested for ADHD. Maybe there was a medical explanation, something we could treat. He resisted at first. Mark hates doctors, hates the idea that anything might be wrong with him, but eventually agreed. The test came back negative. No ADHD, no learning disabilities, nothing. Just a man who, in the doctor's diplomatic words, struggles with executive function and organizational tasks. See? Mark had said almost triumphantly. I'm not broken. This is just who I am. And that's when I first heard his favorite excuse. Making lists, setting reminders, creating systems. All of it was physically painful for him. Not metaphorically painful. Physically painful. Like his brain would actually hurt if he tried to be organized. I work better under pressure, he'd say. I'd rather deal with the occasional emergency than try to prevent every possible problem. Except here's the thing about his occasional emergencies. They were never his emergencies. They were mine. When he forgot to pay the electric bill and our power got shut off, I was the one who had to leave work early to sort it out. When he forgot our daughter's recital and she cried for hours, I was the one comforting her while he made excuses. When he left the shower diverter up for the 10,000th time, I was the one getting drenched in cold water. But the shower thing, God, the shower thing had become symbolic of everything wrong in our marriage. Such a small request. Push the diverter down. That's it. Don't leave it up so the next person gets sprayed with cold water. I'd explained it calmly at first, 20 years ago when we moved in together. Oh, sorry, babe. He'd laughed the first time it happened. I'll remember next time. Next time came 3 days later, and the time after that, a week later. Then it became a pattern. Twice a month, like clockwork, I'd get that unwelcome morning shower. And every single time, the same song and dance. Oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I forgot again. I'm such an idiot. It's okay, I'd say, even though it wasn't. I'm really trying to remember. I promise I'll do better. I know you will, I'd lie. 10 years in, my responses got sharper. Mark, seriously, this has to stop. I know. I'm working on it. How? How are you working on it? I'm being more mindful. Mindful. Christ. He'd started therapy around year 12, not for the shower thing specifically, but for his general inability to function like an adult. The therapist taught him about mindfulness and being present in the moment. Mark latched onto these concepts like life rafts, using them to explain why he couldn't possibly be expected to remember mundane tasks. "I'm too present-focused," he'd say, as if this was some sort of superpower, rather than a fundamental failure to consider other people. "I'm living in the now, not worrying about future consequences." 15 years in, I tried a different approach. I bought one of those sticky notes and put it right on the shower door. "Push down diverter." It lasted exactly 1 day before Mark removed it. "It ruins the aesthetic of the bathroom," he said. "You know what ruins my aesthetic? Starting every day with hypothermia," I shot back. He laughed. He actually laughed like I was making a joke. By year 18, I'd given up asking nicely. Now it was just exhausted sighs and pointed looks. Mark would launch into these elaborate apologies, sometimes lasting 10 or 15 minutes, dissecting his failure in psychological terms he'd learned from his therapist. "I think it's because my father never modeled good organizational behavior," he'd muse while I stood there, still dripping, still cold, still unbelievably frustrated. "I'm breaking generational patterns, you know? It's harder than it looks." Pushing a lever down is breaking generational patterns? You don't understand the psychological weight of it, Sarah. Oh, but I understood. I understood that my husband of nearly 2 decades valued his comfort, his refusal to experience even the slightest discomfort of changing a habit, over my basic request to not start my day with a shock of cold water. Which brings us to this morning, this Tuesday morning when something finally snapped. I stood in that bathroom, water dripping from my hair, and felt 20 years of being the understanding wife, the patient partner, the one who picked up his slack and made excuses for his behavior. All of it just evaporate. I was done. Done with the apologies, done with the promises to do better, done with being told that asking for basic consideration was somehow asking too much. I could hear Mark in our bedroom, humming off key as he got ready for his post-me shower. He always showered after me, claimed he liked the steam I left behind, that it made the bathroom feel cozy. Another one of his quirks I'd once found charming. I looked at the cup sitting by the sink, a cheap plastic thing our daughter had made at camp years ago, decorated with puffy paint and glitter. Without really thinking about it, I picked it up and turned on the cold tap. Not the hot, just the cold. I filled it about 3 inches, just enough. Then I walked out of the bathroom. Mark was standing by our dresser, completely naked, folding his pajamas with the kind of meticulous care he never applied to the shower diverter. His back was to me, and he was still humming, some pop song from the 90s I couldn't quite place. "Morning, babe," he said without turning around. "Shower nice and hot for me?" I didn't answer. I walked up behind him, that cup of cold water in my hand, and for just a moment I hesitated. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to stoop to his level? Then I remembered this morning's shock, and yesterday's minor flood when he'd left the sink running, and last week's spoiled groceries because he'd forgotten to put the milk away, and 20 years of being the only adult in this marriage. I didn't throw the water. Throwing would have been too aggressive, too violent. Instead, I held the cup firmly and jerked it at a precise 45-degree angle, making sure the water arced perfectly to hit him from face to groin in one smooth motion. Mark's reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. He shrieked, actually shrieked, and jumped backward, his hands flying to cover himself as if the cold water might steal his manhood. His eyes were wide with shock, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Sarah, what the hell?" "Unpleasant, isn't it?" I said calmly, setting the empty cup on the dresser. That shocking feeling of cold water when you're not expecting it, that jarring, uncomfortable, day-ruining sensation. You, you just, that was ice cold." Yes, yes it was. Just like the shower I get twice a month because you can't be bothered to push down a simple lever. His shock was morphing into indignation. That's, that's completely different. I don't do it on purpose." "No, you do something worse. You do it because you don't care enough to remember. 20 years, Mark. 20 years I've been asking you for this one simple thing. I've apologized. Every single time I've apologized. Your apologies are worth the paper they're written on," I said, and I could hear 20 years of suppressed frustration bleeding into my voice. which is to say nothing, because you've never even bothered to write them down. You just say the words and expect that to be enough. I've been getting better. He was reaching for a towel now, wrapping it around himself with wounded dignity. Dr. Peterson says I'm making real progress. Oh, please, you congratulate yourself for getting better when you remember to push the diverter down once a month. That's not progress, Mark. That's the bare minimum, and you're not even achieving that consistently. This is assault, he said, his voice dropping into that serious tone he used when he wanted to win an argument. You physically assaulted me. I gave you a taste of your own medicine. Literally 3 inches of cold water. You've given me hundreds of full-body cold showers over 2 decades. If we're talking about assault, I think I'm still owed significant payback. It's not the same thing. You're right, it's not. Because I did it once to make a point. You do it repeatedly despite being asked not to, because you can't be bothered to care about how your actions affect me. Mark stood there dripping and glaring, and I could see him cycling through his usual defensive strategies. First would come the psychological analysis, then the childhood trauma excuse, then the grand apology with promises of change. Look, he started, his voice shifting to that pseudo-therapeutic tone he'd adopted since starting counseling. I understand you're frustrated. Your feelings are valid. But attacking me physically isn't the answer. We should talk about this in a calm, productive way. We have talked about it. For 20 years, we've talked about it. I've been calm. I've been patient. I've been understanding. And where has that gotten me? Still getting cold showers twice a month while you congratulate yourself for remembering to be a basic, functional adult once in a blue moon. You're being dramatic. No, Mark. For once, I'm being honest. And here's some more honesty for you. I'm done. I'm done pretending that your weaponized incompetence is charming. I'm done acting like your inability to do basic tasks is some quirky personality trait rather than a fundamental lack of respect for me and everyone else in this house. Weaponized incompetence? I saw that on TikTok. You're seriously getting our marriage advice from TikTok now? I'm not getting marriage advice from anywhere. I'm stating a fact. You use your supposed inability to remember things as a weapon to avoid responsibility. It's always someone else's job to remind you, to fix your mistakes, to deal with the consequences of your forgetfulness. And I'm tired of it. Mark's face had gone from shock to angry to something else, something I hadn't seen before. Fear, maybe? Or perhaps just the dawning realization that I wasn't playing my usual role in our well-worn script. Sarah, come on. It's just a shower diverter. Is it really worth all this drama? That's exactly the point, I practically shouted. It's just a shower diverter. It's such a small, simple thing, and you still can't do it. If you can't remember something that basic after 20 years of reminders, what does that say about how much you value my comfort? My requests? Me? The bathroom was silent except for the drip of water from Mark's hair onto the hardwood floor. I could see him formulating his response. Probably another excuse wrapped in therapy speak. My therapist says, he began, I don't care what Dr. Peterson says. I care what you do. And what you do, consistently, is forget about everyone else's needs while expecting us to cater to yours. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you made dinner without being asked? When did you last remember our anniversary without me reminding you a week in advance? When have you ever, even once, remembered to put the toilet seat down or turn off the lights or lock the front door or any of the 1,000 other things I ask you to do? I have ADHD tendencies. No, you don't. We had you tested, twice. You just don't care enough to try. Making lists physically hurts me. No, it doesn't. You just don't like doing it. There's a difference between discomfort and pain, Mark. What's painful is living with someone who treats you like their mother instead of their partner. He stood there still clutching his towel, and I could see the exact moment when his indignation transformed into self-pity. His shoulders slumped. His eyes got that hangdog look I'd seen 1,000 times before. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. Impact matters more than intent. You might not mean to hurt me, but you do. Consistently. And then you expect me to comfort you about what a bad husband you are, as if your guilt is somehow my responsibility to manage. I don't. You do. Every time you forget something and I get upset, Somehow I end up being the one consoling you, telling you it's okay, that you're not a terrible person. Well, I'm done with that too. You want absolution? Get it from Dr. Peterson. Or better yet, actually change your behavior. Mark looked like he wanted to argue more, but something in my face must have stopped him. Maybe it was the complete absence of the understanding smile I usually wore during these confrontations. Maybe it was the fact that I wasn't backing down or softening my words with, "but I love you anyway," platitudes. "I'm taking a shower," he said finally, his voice stiff with wounded pride. "A hot one, and I'll push the diverter down when I'm done." "Sure you will," I said, turning to leave. "Until next time." "There won't be a next time." I paused at the doorway and looked back at him. He was already heading into the bathroom, his back rigid with indignation. 20 years of marriage, and I knew him well enough to know that by tonight, he'd have rewritten this entire incident in his mind. I'd become the irrational one, the one who overreacted to a simple mistake. He'd tell Dr. Peterson about his abusive wife who threw water on him, leaving out 20 years of context. "Mark," I said, and he turned to look at me. "I want you to know something. That water I threw on you, that was 3 inches in a cup. What you put me through is hundreds of gallons over 20 years. If you want to talk about who's been wronged here, do the math." I left him standing there and went downstairs to make coffee. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from regret, from relief. 20 years of being the bigger person, the understanding wife, the one who never made waves, all of that ended with 3 inches of cold water. As I waited for the coffee to brew, I heard the shower turn on upstairs, and I smiled because I absolutely knew, that he'd forgotten to check the diverter before turning it on. The yelp that followed confirmed it. Old habits, as they say, die hard. The coffee maker gurgled its completion, and I poured myself a cup, adding just the right amount of cream and sugar. Through the kitchen window, I could see our neighbor Sharon walking her dog. Normal suburban life continuing as always, oblivious to the small revolution that had just occurred in our bedroom. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "That was childish and cruel." I typed back, "Yes, it was." Just like leaving the diverter up after being asked not to for 20 years. The difference is, I did it once to make a point. You do it repeatedly because you don't care. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I'm calling Dr. Peterson for an emergency session." "Good," I replied. "Maybe ask him why you can remember your gaming passwords, your fantasy football lineup, and every single plot point from Breaking Bad, but you can't remember to push down a shower diverter." No response to that one. I sat at our kitchen island, sipping my coffee, and thought about what came next. I wasn't planning to leave him, not over a shower diverter anyway, but I was done enabling him, done pretending that his learned helplessness was anything other than a choice, done being the only adult in this marriage. My phone rang. My sister Emma. "Hey," I answered. "Hey, yourself. You sound weird. Everything okay?" "I threw cold water on Mark this morning." There was a pause, then, "Like, metaphorically?" "No, literally. Cup of cold water, right in the face and down his naked body." "Oh my God, Sarah, why?" 20 years of him leaving the shower diverter up. I finally snapped. "The shower thing? He's still doing that? I remember you complaining about that when you guys were dating." "Yeah, well, he never stopped. Despite hundreds of requests, promises to change, and apparently extensive therapy about his inability to remember basic tasks." Emma laughed, actually laughed. "Good for you. Honestly, I'm surprised it took you this long. You don't think I was out of line?" "Sarah, honey, you've been asking that man to do one simple thing for longer than my kids have been alive. If 3 inches of cold water is what it takes to get through to him, I'd say you showed remarkable restraint. He says I assaulted him. And leaving the shower diverter up twice a month for 20 years is what exactly? Accidental biological warfare? He doesn't do it on purpose. Stop. Stop right there. Stop making excuses for him. Whether he does it on purpose or not doesn't matter. The impact is the same. You've asked him to stop. He hasn't." End of story. I could hear Mark moving around upstairs, probably getting dressed in a huff. He'd spend the day playing the victim, telling anyone who'd listen about his crazy wife who attacked him with cold water. He'd leave out the context, of course, the 20 years of requests, the hundreds of cold showers, the complete dismissal of my basic comfort. I should probably go, I told Emma. He's about to come down and do his wounded puppy routine. Don't fall for it. You've given that man more patience than any human deserves. It's time he learned that actions have consequences. Even if that consequence is cold water to the face? Especially then. Talk to you later. And Sarah, I'm proud of you. I hung up just as Mark came downstairs, fully dressed in his work clothes, his hair still damp from his shower. He didn't look at me as he poured his own coffee. A small miracle, since usually he'd wait for me to do it for him. I'm going to work early, he announced to the refrigerator. Okay, I'll be home late. Team dinner. No, you don't have a team dinner. You have drinks with Steve and Paul, like every Tuesday. But calling it a team dinner makes it sound like an obligation instead of a choice. He turned to look at me surprised. How did you? Because I pay attention, Mark. I know your schedule better than you do. I know you have a dentist appointment next Thursday that you've forgotten about. I know your mother's birthday is in 2 weeks and you haven't bought a card yet. I know everything because I have to know everything because you can't be bothered to remember your own life. That's not, it is. It absolutely is. And I'm done being your external hard drive. From now on, you remember your own appointments, your own obligations, your own mother's birthday, and if you forget, you deal with the consequences. You're being unreasonable. No, I'm being reasonable for the first time in 20 years. I'm treating you like the adult you claim to be instead of the child you act like. Mark set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. Fine. You want me to be better? I'll be better. I'll push down the stupid shower thing every single time. Happy? I'll believe it when I see it. You'll see it, he said, grabbing his laptop bag. I'll prove to you that I can change. Mark, I said as he headed for the door. He paused but didn't turn around. This isn't about proving anything to me. It's about basic consideration for the person you claim to love. The fact that you see it as some kind of challenge or competition rather than just being a decent partner? That tells me everything I need to know. He left without responding, the door closing a little too hard behind him. I sat in the quiet kitchen, finishing my coffee, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that he'd change. I'd given up on that particular fantasy. But hope that I could change. That I could stop enabling him. Stop making excuses. Stop being the only functional adult in this relationship. My phone buzzed. Another text from Mark. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I promise. The same words he'd said 1,000 times before. But this time, I didn't respond with my usual, I know you will, or it's okay. This time, I didn't respond at all, because I was done with words, done with promises, done with apologies. If he wanted to prove he could change, he could start by pushing down that shower diverter. Every single time. And if he couldn't, well, I had a whole sink full of cups and plenty of cold water. The morning sun was fully up now, streaming through the kitchen windows, warming my face. It was going to be a beautiful day. And for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't going to spend it worrying about managing Mark's feelings or compensating for his failures. I was just going to live my life. And if that life occasionally included throwing cold water on my husband to make a point, so be it. After all, turnabout is fair play. And 20 years of cold showers had taught me that sometimes the only way to get someone's attention is to shock them out of their comfort zone, even if it takes 3 inches of cold water to do it.